To add a little bit of this to getting the video about Genie Djinn shadow connection, and then also I'm gonna touch a little bit on the Shadow King just to give as many connections as possible. But the Quran, the Holy Book of Islam, frequently mentions Jinn. And basically, the Quran also describes Jinn as being made of fire and having free will. And the Quran also mentions how the Prophet Solomon was able to control Jinn. And, again, just on the movie reference tip, 3,000 Years of Longing with Idris Elba. Just to, add to that. But as I was gonna say, also with the Shadow King from Marvel, in Legion. The Shadow King was from, where they depict him connected to Egypt and Morocco. But he's also, like, in essence, kind of has like this Arabic name, but like basically connecting him to, like, the Islamic, religion in certain ways, just connecting them to that, to that area. Again, the Quran describes Jinn as being created from the fire, not from clay like humans. Just like humans, Jinn have free will and can choose to follow God or stray from the path. The Quran mentions that Jinn can interact with humans both positively and negatively and can sometimes influence their actions. The Quran recounts how Prophet Solomon had the ability to control Jinn, using them for various tasks. All right. Shadow King. Amal Farouk. So originally introduced, Farouk was a human mutant from Egypt who used his vast telepathic abilities for evil, taking the alias Shadow King. Later, writers established Farouk as the modern incarnation of an ancient evil entity. And again, just, not to get too lost in the sauce of, because just how they just said, like, in the Quran, like, the Jinn had the ability to be negatively or positively affect, humanity. Because again, just like a genie, a genie, you got genies like Genie from Aladdin, where he necessarily wasn't trying to, grant wishes in a monkey's paw type of way. And what I mean by monkey's paw type of way, again, like the example of, like, where if you made a wish to be beautiful and be seen by everybody, on a monkey's paw, like trickster type of wish granting energy, your wish would be granted, but you would be turned into a mannequin in the front of a popular store, which technically that ain't what you was, like, you wish for that in essence, but you wasn't, specifically trying to be a mannequin, in a store, you feel me? Like, so. But, and right here, his abilities: telepathy, possession, and immortality. But again, like, possession, you feel me? The possessive energy is also associated with the Scorpio energy. Don't trip, we connected to all aspects of the zodiac sign. That's why I made a joke in that video with Bridge of Ra, I was like, so you telling me that all Scorpios are, quote unquote bad? And it's like, nah, but this is connected to it though. So let's see, fictional character biography again. The Shadow King's origins are unclear. All that is known is that he was living in Morocco until the 1800s before taking Farouk as a host. Again, the host, ghost, Holy Ghost. He claims to be a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness. Hey, the shadow, you got to do your shadow work, or it's all the parts of yourself that you push to the side, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, seeing that, but spawned by the first nightmare and has since been feeding on the shadows in their souls, transferring from host to host since the dawn of humanity. Then they got him here working with Adolf Hitler. But you get the picture. I just wanted to, because I want to see if they also put it. If they bring up. Dang. Hold on, let me go back to the top. All right, here we go. Again, in connection with the show Legion, portrayed primarily by Aubrey Plaza in the first season, in the form of Lenny Busker and Navid Nagaban in the second and third seasons. Prior to the revelation of the character's identity, he was referred to by David Harler as the devil with the yellow eyes. The Shadow King takes several forms over the course of the series, including the Angry Boy and David's friend, Benny. But again, that's Djinn. One of the top spiritual psychological shows. Again, Legion, similar to the Legion in the Bible, he was in essence like a quote unquote diagnosed schizophrenic. You feel me? But just getting to this part. Holly eventually discovers, Legion eventually discovers that his mind is infected by a parasitic mutant, another psychic named Amar Farouk, or the Shadow King, and is able to force the villain from his mind. Hence why everything be so much about meditation. And he even had that in the show, like he started becoming more, David or Legion, was meditating more, what I'm saying, doing these types of things, what I'm saying, like that's all connected to that, But, like doing the meditation, doing things to just allow us to be aware of our thoughts and not let our thoughts control us in that sense, but and so much importance again, like on mental health and all that. You see where that's all connected. So yeah, I just wanted to add that simple little part to it, show y'all who, what I'm saying, who Farouk the Shadow King is. You feel me? So yeah, just drawing the connections. So right now I'm getting into that space where uh, I won't be able to go too much deep into this because it's almost like revealing a lot. And again, a lot of this type of stuff you got to do for yourself, But I definitely have the green light to share some of this and still connecting to the Shadow King and disconnecting to our, existence. But what I want to bring up is, for one, the movie Predestination, the movie Looper, and the show Umbrella Academy, with number 5. But like those 3 examples, but in a lot of cases, and matter of fact, and you could even say the 12 Monkeys to some extent, if I'm not mistaken. But it's basically like where movies where a person time travel and end up finding out that matter of fact, this is also in Flash. Dang. I want to say the latest Flash movie. Well, Flash ended up finding out that, he traveled in time and realized that the person he was battling was him. Connected to the mirror effect, you know. 10 net, Malkut 10 net, like a planet, like a net, almost like being in a net, captured in a net. The Malkut net, 10 net. But just adding little connections. Yeah, the dog god, and again, it's basically like Anubis. That's why the cross, which is in essence like a death symbol. Hence why Christ was crucified on a cross. But that's the theme in each and every single one of these, shows and movies I just brought up. Where a person time traveling, trying to switch something up or change something, and then they end up coming across themselves. Even in the show Loki, you feel me? In the show Loki, you could say Loki ended up coming across another version of himself, which was a female part of himself, in which he met other dimensions of himself as well, But then also, the antagonist in the Loki series, what's his name? He who remains, you know what I'm saying? But the brethren who basically he played by the dude from I forgot the name of that show, but anyway, just the cat on the Loki show who's called He Who Remains, you know what I'm saying? But how he even was dealing with, the multi-dimensional aspect of, fighting himself or realizing he was up against himself on a multi-dimensional or quote-unquote time traveling, situation. Somewhat the same thing in the movie The One, with Jet Li, but again, well, I mean, yeah, you could say it's like different timelines or different dimensions, of self. But all of these things of you versus you. Now, what also came up was the twin flame, because I thought of like, damn, as I'm looking at, just this archetype of a person dealing with their shadow self, which in some cases may even feel like a battle, you know. But ultimately, with the twin flame situation, I thought about, again, like how the Djinn are not only shadow beings, but also connected to flames. And I'm like, oh shit, because again, what your shadow is considered? Your shadow is considered a reflection or your double. Like what's a twin? You know what I'm saying? A twin is like your double or reflection. And as I was tying the connections to the whole bull L, or the bull or the Taurus or the fixed signs, you know, what comes after the fixed sign of Taurus? You know what I'm saying? Gemini, the twins, so right after the bull, you got the twins that come into play. You feel me? So, it's like a unique no coincidence that uniquely aligns in that type of way. And as I'm saying this is me, just sharing from experiences and tying these things together. Take what resonate, leave what don't. You got to do your own research. You got to have your own experiences. But it's just one of those things, again, like, just I love to share these things because I feel like, I never heard it. And I feel like anything that I haven't heard from anybody else, it may be meant for me to share on certain levels, Because some things, I do realize it's more personal, but this is not just personal. This is like, a collective situation, so to speak. So, and it came to me again with this connection, in the third season. So due to the Shadow Kings, let's see, I'm not gonna really get into that part of it. So David gets a time traveler mutant named Switch on his side. He plans to improve Switch's power in order to protect the world. Now, let's see, get into it again. David then uses Switch to go back to when he was a child and witness various parts of his parents' past, including his father, Charles Xavier, going to war and meeting his mother, Gabriel Holler, at the mental facility, and his father locating and meeting Farouk and how Farouk got into him in the first place. Though this does bring both sides into conflict with the Time Eaters. And that just hit too, because it's like, all right, the Time Eaters coming at both Farouk and David, our Legion, you know what I'm saying? So, the quote unquote, whoever you want to see as the protagonist or antagonist, And if you watch the show, you see that both of them, like David, even though, Farouk is a parasitic being trying to mess with his consciousness, and would be considered the toxic antagonist, David, our Legion, also do some things that may be considered toxic as well, you feel me? But either way, they both come across the Time Eaters, It's basically like these beings that come after people when they time traveling too much. You know what I'm saying? They dimension hopping too much, then the Time Eaters, come after them. Now, spoiler alert, you know what I'm saying? David did get to a space where he did learn how to stop the Time Eaters, Basically like having the mental confidence to know how much he was the creator of his experience, and that, the Time Eaters could only stop him as much as he allowed it to happen, you feel me? But yeah, this just got me to the space of like, like the whole thing with us, like that's always being brought up is like us time traveling or being a multi-dimensional being, and now it's the vibrate, and in this moment you could transmute your past and create your future right now, you know what I'm saying? Like all of that time travel, dimensional traveling energy, you know what I'm saying, relating to us trying to, understand a lot of cases, trying to understand like how did this all start, you know what I'm saying? Whether it's just, you know, on a microcosmic level, like, at first, like we're just trying to understand ourselves from a human perspective, and then this incarnation, and then like going to a deeper level of like, all right, like reincarnation or incarnation, and lifetimes and ancestors, and what I'm saying, looking at it from that perspective, but it's just a constant theme of, you know, like time travel. And it also could be seen again like twins, you know, like twin flames, but twins, like, dealing with each other, you feel me? But so up here, this is more so connected to the show Magicians. And there were two twins that were locked up by, they were locked up by the gods. But basically, they could not die. They were immortal, you know what I'm saying? And that, again, like the Shadow King, is immortal, you know what I'm saying? They only could be locked away or in prison. But the twins could not function if separated from each other. The brother of the twins didn't have no memory, and the prison they was locked in was, in the seam between the universes. It was like a little in between realm, in between the earth plane. I want to say in between the earth, in the show Magicians, you know what I'm saying? So in the show Magicians, they were in between the earthly plane and Fillory. Fillory was, the other little, the other world with, with the magic and, yeah, just leave it at that. And let's see. Yeah, and the twins were stripped of their body and their memory. And on the Magicians, in order to, I want to say they had to, like, in order to defeat the twins in a certain way, they had to go on a quest for 7 keys. And that always goes into chakras. There were 7 chakras. There's 7 underworld portals. And then also that taps into, the whole situation with Voldemort and the Horcrux in, Harry Potter. The Horcrux was 7 items that, a magician could, tether to the different fragments of their soul, so they could like become immortal, So, you see, like, again, and just always this connection with resurrection too, that always comes up. Resurrection, time travel, this is in fairy tales. Natsu brother Zeref created this thing called the Eclipse Gate, and also a thing called the Tower of Heaven. But he created this Eclipse Gate and this Tower of Heaven in order to go back in time. The Eclipse Gate, you know what I'm saying? And the Eclipse Gate was connected again to celestial bodies, but he created this Eclipse Gate to try to go back in time. And, one part he tried to go back in time, and then when things didn't work out that way, he went to the future. But either way, to resurrect his brother, And that, again, as I brought up, with Voldemort and the 7 Horcruxes, like trying to resurrect, you got Zeref from fairy tales trying to resurrect, his brother, aka Natsu. You got Anakin Skywalker, representing the Scorpio archetype, trying to resurrect, what's her name? His baby moms. You got the Elric brothers in Full Metal Alchemist trying to resurrect their mom using magic. You know. Then you got Lord Voldemort, you know, using the 7 Horcruxes to try to evade death, you know. And that also just brings up the archetype of like just fighting death in essence. And no coincidence, that's also in Soul Eater, you know, the anime Soul Eater. The lady, I forgot her name, but the witch who fighting the Grim Reaper, fighting death, you know what I'm saying? You know, quite literally, and you know, it would play into figuratively as well. Cause technically that's what you're doing when you're, you know what I'm saying? When you're trying to time travel and I say by just time traveling in general, but you know, in essence, in most cases, you know, it's also connected to time travel, or even indirectly, you know, it's trying to turn back the hands of time in essence. It's like I'm trying to, you know, go back into a space where, you know, again, where this person is still alive, you know. So it's like time travel in essence, either way you look at it. You feel me? 12 Monkeys is like trying to time travel to prevent an apocalypse, you know. Which is, again, trying to, in essence, like resurrect somebody, you know what I'm saying? The second, so you got like the Infinity Wars, and then you got the second one that came after, where, I forgot, Endgame, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, they trying to you know what I'm saying, resurrect everybody that disappeared. You know, after Thanos snapped his finger, they're trying to go back in time or to, you know, dimensionally travel to resurrect. You know. So just, you know, just little things that, you know, you see these connections with the whole resurrection. And I got the video I did on the Connecting Dots video about resurrection and I was talking about like the dog archetypes and the bones and the Scorpio archetype, you know. Scorpio being the death card in the tarot, and the tarot the 13th card, and you know that whole little connection, because Christ is the 13 and resurrection, you know, he resurrected, you know. And then also like a Nana being, you know, or Ishtar or Easter, you know, because that came before the whole Jesus story of like her being resurrected from out of the underworld. You know, in fairy tales, when somebody used the eclipse gate or traveled in time through the eclipse gate, through that portal, because in essence it's like going through the underworld, they had like these like this etheric nanotechnology that kind of was like in their auric field in essence, and to people who could kind of like pick up on, you know, had like a sense, like a clairvoyance to pick up on that energy or that film, and you know, basically like that residue in a person's aura after they use the eclipse gate. It basically made them seem like they were Zeref. Again, Zeref is Natsu brother who tried to resurrect them and had the book of Zeref. But anyway, and the book of Zeref was a book in connection with like him, you know, creating these like etheric type of little beings. Matter of fact, let me see, since I'm right here, if I got it. Let's see. Yeah, etherious beings created by Zereth, you know. And basically though, the beings were created by Zereth in order, like, he created the beings to try to, cause him to transition in so many ways, but not stepping too far away again, as I was talking about the Ishtar or Inanna resurrection, in Sumerian mythology. So just like I brought up the Eclipse Gate, and going through the Eclipse Gate, you kind of had like a little residue that in essence was like, it's almost in so many ways it's like astral residue, where you kind of smelt like Zereth in so many ways, you know what I'm saying? You had the scent of, of passing through the Eclipse Gate on you, and the same thing with Ishtar or slash Inanna, where when she resurrected and came out of the underworld, she still had like a little underworld residue on her, and AKA, like it was said in the mythology of it, like she had like some of the little, spirits or entities from, the underworld was like, in essence, trying to stay connected to her auric field, you feel me? And that goes into, real life auric field hygiene, you know what I'm saying? But, simply just another connection, going through portals, time traveling, fighting with yourself or fighting with your twin or your reflection or your shadow or your double, or quote unquote, or fighting the devil, you know what I'm saying? Fighting your inner demons, the devil, or devil connected to, like, considering hell to be, something with flames or hot. But like as some may say, it may be more so cold, again. Because the Holy Ghost, connected to, the bull energy as well. Because the bull, the sign for Taurus, is stubborn. Stubborn is related to being frozen. Frozen is cold. And ghosts are related to, coldness, because they no longer have a warm body. And in certain, again, this goes into terraforming, you know what I'm saying? The videos I did about like spirit terraforming, or, like understanding like what type of, like spirits you would find in the desert, or spirits you would find in places where it snow a lot, or spirits you would find where it's hot. You feel me? Like, and that all goes back into, zodiac spirits, but, zodiac spirits, King Solomon, and no coincidence, again, like a show with the Quran, and like how he was mentioned to, King Solomon was mentioned to be able to have control over jinns, control over these celestial spirits, these angels or angels and demons, you know what I'm saying, which it was more so considered demons, but again, like an angel or demon more so was just in essence like the yin and yang of, of the being, of the archetype, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, like you got a yin aspect to Taurus energy, you got a yang aspect to Taurus energy, a positive and a negative, stubbornness, AKA, because Taurus is also an earth sign, that stubbornness, that that frozenness, you know what I'm saying, that stiffness creates a solid ground for you to walk on. That's a positive thing. If there's a, any aspect of you enjoying your experience in this realm, a lot of it would have to do with the fact that things ain't extremely chaotic, in the sense of, well, again, like the earth, not the element of earth and the earth itself, you know what I'm saying, the ground, so to speak, is not constantly changing, you know what I'm saying? If the earth had to change rapidly, then that would be very, very, very chaotic. You feel me? And unless you like the extreme of chaos, which that would go into a whole situation again, like with, spirits or beings that would like chaos on that level, or like, again, like constant change where there was no form of, stability, you know. And again, as we say the word chaos and, constantly moving and growing, because that's in essence what chaos is connected to. Hence why, as we're like transforming, and you're going through your spiritual transformation, and growing, and hence why that could be considered in certain moments chaotic, because it's constantly moving. It's like a constant change, constant growth, and again, in essence, you get to a space where you like appreciate that stubborn, frozen ground, you know what I'm saying? That stability, that Saturn energy. You feel it? That slow moving vibration of the earth that gives you a little bit of stability. You know what I'm saying? So you see how all of it, again, it's like no good or bad to it. It's just different types of elements that serve different purposes. Yeah. We're gonna leave it at that, but just again, that connection with the time travel, because when it hit like Farouk and Legion, end up having to fight against the time eaters due to them like timeline jumping. You feel me? And I'm like, all right, that's that seems like basically indirectly like the story of us, like, it's about being present, and in the present moment, the past and future exist, and healing your past and creating your future, and even, in essence, like creating your afterlife, so to speak, you know what I'm saying? But you see all of those connections. But now it's the vibrate. Y'all know what it is. Peace.